I don't remember leaving these lights on over here. Oh, what's going on here? Who are you and what are you doing here? You want to take the money or the cars? You can have whatever you want.
You know exactly who I am and why I'm here. I want to know date, time, and place.
I don't know who you are or what you want from me.
Now you know who I am.
Oh, look, man, I'm trying. Life just gets hard, and I got married and moved houses, and I had to move the car place to place, and it takes money. And
That's not my problem. It's been 9 years.
I promise it'll be done soon.
I've heard that before.
Hi, my name is Ben Plaisance, and in this video, we're going to be going over the overview of this car since people have asked nicely. So I guess you're wondering, Ben, why 3000 GTs? Why not a Supra or NSX or RX-7? Well, those are all nice cars, but to tell my story, we're going to have to go back to my first car. My first car I seen for sale on a corner of a stoplight one day, and I annoyed my parents enough until they finally bought one for me. It was that same car. It was a 1991 3000 GT. And I also got a spare engine with it. So with that spare engine, I started tinkering with it and taking it apart and planning to build it, put pistons, rods, heads on it, and find a 3000 GT VR4 shell to put it into. Because of course when I was young and just bought the car or just got the car, I didn't know too much about the car other than the fact that it looked nice, and we grew up in the Fast and the Furious times where those kind of cars appealed to me. So that kind of started my whole also wrenching on cars for a living thing right there too. So that really changed my life a good deal. So anyway, back to the story. I ended up actually finding this car on an old forum, and it had been for sale for years. It was practically a shell. It was a couple years old, but I still messaged the guy and reached out and seen if I can still get the car, and he said yes, it was available. So we went out and looked at it, and of course I had to have it. So we got the car and towed it back, and the original plan of putting the non-turbo engine into the car wasn't exactly the best idea. And I did get a lot of spare parts with it, but there was a lot of parts missing as well. So in the next about 2 years, I spent rebuilding and learning, just researching on the forums almost every single day on how to put it back together, just electrical systems, how could I make it faster even though it wasn't even running yet, but I did eventually get it running. So between those two cars, that really set my love for them, it started that off. And after it was running and stuff, I loved going to the gas stations or wherever I park, and nobody really knows what it is. They always ask if it's an Eclipse or a Supra, or their grandpa's uncle used to have one of those cars and it ends up it's like an Eclipse or something. I just like being a little bit different than everybody else. There's not a lot of, over time there's been some high horsepower car 3000 GTs, but you mainly see the mainstream cars like the Supra or RX-7s or anything like that all the time. So around 2012, I decided to pull the engine and transmission out to put a supercar engineering center differential with a 300 M output shaft in it. And also to clean up the oily mess that the engine had just been leaking out over time. I took the transmission apart. I actually bought a billet end case for the end case. But as I was going to reseal the engine, I found that I didn't do the greatest job putting it together the first time. Some of the rods were extremely tight and some of them were kind of loose. So I planned the build and I bought all the parts to build the 3-liter. Everything was going good. Started hoarding parts, and I got to the point where I had everything to build the engine and transmission and put it back together. But then I started making more money, and I found a billet crankshaft and piston combo for sale on the forums, and it was never ran or anything like that. So I was like, this is not a bad deal. So I ended up selling off everything I had to build the 3-liter and bought the stroker crank and pistons. I was under the impression that I could still use my 3-liter block because I had not done enough research. But come to find out, I needed to buy a 3.5-liter 6G74 engine to put that stuff into. So I worked some more and bought one of those engines from Japan and took that all apart and bought the rods that I needed and everything like that, and sent it off to Ray Pampina to build the shark block for me. So that took a little while because, I mean, Ray's a busy man and Merkle Racing Engines is obviously really a busy shop. So while I was waiting on that, I sent my heads out to this place called IPS Motorsports, and they're no longer a company anymore. I sent my heads out, and a couple months went by, and I still didn't hear anything. So I sent them an email to see what's up, and they assured me, yes, everything's going good. The heads are over there. So then I waited a couple more weeks and emailed them again, and this time they gave me a promise date and stuff like that. So we missed the promise date, and I was starting to get annoyed and kept going back and forth with them. It ended up taking a little over a year to get my heads done and shipped to me. And I'm lucky I even got the heads back, because right after that, the company shut down. So now I have this 3.7-liter billet stroker with some nice heads on it. And I had already planned to ditch the twins and go single, because I had, way back in the day, I was experimenting and did a kind of crappy single turbo kit on it, and it ran, but I was never able to really drive it. But I was always seduced by the idea of having a single turbo 3000 GT, because for all the high horsepower cars, there's even less single turbo high horsepower cars. So I bought a kit for a 3-liter, and the 3.5 liters deck is taller, so the heads are further apart, so you can't really use that. But my plan was to have it modified and use it like that. Well, at this point, I've been waiting on shops and stuff like that to give me my parts for a couple years now, so I was tired of dealing with all that and decided to take things into my own hands. So I started practicing welding, and I started getting good at it, so I started making my own kit. Well, that takes time too, but at least it was in my own hands at this point. So I got the kit all done now, but while I was also making the kit, I took apart everything on the car. There was no bolt left unturned on this thing. The underbody was stripped and recoated. The subframe was taken down to replace the all-wheel steering, take it out, put a delete kit in there, and made the subframe look nice with paint and sandblasted it and everything. It has a upgraded rear sway bar in there now too. while the engine was out, I had the base sprayed, as you can see in some of the that first video I made. I converted the brakes, front and rear, to Evo 10 calipers. The front ones have Evo 10 two-piece rotors from Disc. This intercooler right here is an ETS 4-inch or 4.5-inch core, and I made my own intercooler piping. The intake manifold was made by Brian Carter for me. This has a Pro EFI ECU, and all over the car I have some things that I didn't really need, but I bought it anyway, like that wing. I got that for a good deal. It was a direct bolt-on to this chassis that was made by Supercar Engineering. It has 4-inch titanium exhaust underneath the car that was made by IPS with a Supra HKS carbon titanium canister on the end. It has some old school Greddy 60mm gauges, and the boost gauge is a 3-bar one, which is really hard to find. I searched for a while to find a matching set of 60mm old school Greddy gauges. The transmission is over there. It's still in pieces. The gear sets are together. I did all that myself. Replaced all the synchros and put billet shift forks in it. And now I'm just waiting on a brace for the mid case to be made so that we can weld it in and just assemble the transmission after that. So that's what we're waiting on for that. I have my valve covers. I welded in some bungs for a catch can and kind of shaved them a little bit to make them look a little bit nicer. I still have to sand some of the JV weld where I welded so that it wouldn't be porous and let oil come through before I send it out to be powder coated. We're going to use the stock wiring harness for now, just to get it running and driving for a little bit before I dive in and make my own wiring harness. I mean, as you can see, the hood doesn't fit. We're gonna have to modify that a little bit. It's not gonna look, I'm not gonna just cut a hole in the hood. I don't like that look. We're gonna raise the cowl some and put some vents in there so it looks nice. I'm still gonna try to keep AC on it, even though at the moment it doesn't look like a possibility, but we'll see what I come up with to try to keep that. My plans for the car is to be able to still drive it on the street, obviously get it running first before we try to talk about horsepower goals, but I would like for it to be over 1,000. It has a 76-75 precision on it at the moment, and we'll see what that does, but I'm probably going to end up switching to a 76-85 or something like that in the future. So that's the goals for the car. Street driven, over 1,000 horsepower, but it is time to put this thing together, and it's going to be hopefully soon.
Oh shit. He didn't move his fucking head. He didn't move his head.
That was good though, but